Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy. And thank you so much for joining me for it. And thank you especially to the people who help make this possible for you every single day at patreon.com/SW7x7. So this is episode 3640. This is the fifth of 7 episodes I'm doing where I'm reflecting on things that I've learned over the course of 10 years of Star Wars podcasting. And the theme for day 5 here is family. So found family, right? That is one of the big lessons of Star Wars, one of the big things that seems to be a common thread across stories. The notion that, yeah, you have your biological family, and that's fine, but you have found family as well, and found family is just as, if not even more important, comparatively speaking. And we're actually seeing some kind of interesting ways that this is playing out with the Acolyte series that's happening now, where as opposed to the biological family in, say, the sequel trilogy, where Rey ultimately realizes her lineage and rejects it because it is an evil lineage, we have, in the Acolyte, May accepting the lineage, which did not seem to necessarily be evil per se, but because of what happens in the situation, like she ends up heading to an evil side of things, but maybe it's not that straightforward, right? Like maybe May witnessed a massacre and feels particularly justified in seeking revenge somehow. So yeah, it's a different way of approaching the family dynamic situation. And then you have Osha, who was not a fan of her biological family, wanted to explore the found family idea with the Jedi, and then ultimately left that found family and is trying to figure her own self out in that regard. Different notions about family, but still kind of discussing the idea and exploring ultimately the idea of a found family. Even May, May has Chimere and whoever this dark stranger is. Oshi has all the people that she was working as a mechneck with. But yeah, the thread of that obviously goes so far back as to be foundational, basically, with Star Wars. And maybe that is one of the things that, as I consider the prequel trilogy, and I've talked about how I wasn't necessarily as big a fan of it. Actually, that's not being very honest. I was definitely not a fan of the prequel trilogy when it came out. And it's over the course of time that it's grown on me. But I think the notion of found family doesn't really ring as true for the prequel trilogy, because I guess on the one hand, like, the Jedi are kind of a found family, but everybody's been together for so long that it does feel like it's not necessarily found family anymore. Now it's just actual family. And and then Anakin and Padme become a created family, and so now you're against that idea, and so bizarrely Anakin / Darth Vader becomes found family to the Emperor. And yeah, this is not necessarily going the way I would have thought about the family situation. But I do like the idea that they are exploring various ideas about family in Star Wars movies. And it does seem like that has been a pillar of Star Wars storytelling over the last 10 years. They were fully aware when they rebooted the canon, they started these sequel era movies, of the power in family in Star Wars. Certainly they were building on it by calling things the Skywalker saga, right? It was never called the Skywalker saga as far as I recall. Maybe they started calling it that a few years after Revenge of the Sith was released, but yeah, it was kind of a new idea to be kicking around in the sequel era. But they went with the found family thing with Rey and Finn and Poe. It works. It's a great formula, and I guess maybe it's another thing that was cribbed from the original trilogy. But be that as it may, they did pretty well with it, all things considered. and even Solo and Rogue One are in their way about found family and about, people working together toward common cause. And I feel like, podcasting, like there is family to be found in this podcasting world as well. Like I have not, talked to nearly as many podcasters, fellow Star Wars podcasters, as I ought to have over the years. I've been pretty solitary for the most part in that regard, and that's, a thing that's not to my credit, I'll be perfectly honest with you. But the times that I have been in contact with and have had conversations with other Star Wars podcasters have been some of the most rewarding moments of my doing this over the course of 10 years. And then meeting people who listen to the podcast and who, were familiar with me, who have been inviting me into their daily experience. I had people tell me that they listen to me over breakfast or in the shower or, on their morning commute. And I've become part of people's, sort of found family in that way. And that has been a truly humbling thing to discover over and over again as I talk to more people about, their experiences and about what they've been hearing over the years. So, this has been a big family thing. And, I guess all families, biological and found families, sometimes you do better for people, than, for some people than other people, and you do better, overall, sometimes better than you do at others. You're good at some things and you're not good at other ththings. There's a joke in our family about how certain people seem to be responsible for being the ones to plan things, to be, plan like, oh, what will the family do, on this particular weekend or things like that. And that it's not just the case for themselves, but also just for their own friend sets, and that it can be a little tiring in that regard, right? So yeah, that's, sort of an area where my own family inclinations that I have not been as good as I might have wanted to be, reflecting back on 10 years of Star Wars podcasting. But those moments that I have had were absolutely wonderful, and I've been, exceedingly grateful for them. And I've been exceedingly grateful for meeting people who have told me that this has mattered in their lives. I'm very just blown away by that constantly, and just it's I can let it make me emotional if I sit with it. But I'm just grateful for you listening to this here in this moment. If you've made it this far in the podcast, thank you so much for listening to me. Think about family and about how it's been expressed in Star Wars, and how I've found it to be expressed in my own life during these 10 years of Star Wars podcasting. That's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. If you enjoy the show, please help me get more people to listen to it. I would really appreciate that. You know how to do that. And you can even help me keep making this podcast too. And you can learn more about that at patreon.com/SW7X7. So it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for this episode. As always, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.